Okay, so I did prepare this kind of a list of questions ahead of time for the basis of the panel, but maybe you can just sit there and then I kind of ask your comments. So maybe the first question is about this adoption of this. Okay, which microphone should we be using? This one? Can I use that one? Okay. So the first question is about kind of the feelings of the researcher community about this systematic data management and the secondary use of data among the researchers. So I mean, do you see challenges there, and do you see the attitudes developing in a good way, or what are somehow are there obstacles to overcome in this kind of this research and culture? Are things going somehow smoothly? And somehow primarily look at the kind of the presenters, and if anyone wants to kind of comment on this kind of attitudes and how they are and where should they go.
Well, I mean, so I hear quite frequently that we need to change the attitude and the culture of the researchers to do what we want them to do, which is to cite data and make their things accessible and share publicly. And I agree that that is partially necessary, but I think that what would really be helpful is actually to enable them doing it. So sometimes I get the feeling that we claim that researchers don't want to do it. Right now, if we want to do it, it's hell of a lot of additional work that I don't want to do it. And it's not that I don't want to share the data or make it accessible or cite it. It's just I want to avoid additional work beyond my research. So I think if we want to change this culture, if we want to increase adoption of those principles and open science, we just, in inverted commas, need to provide the services. And if it's easy enough, transparent enough, automated enough, if it happens almost naturally, researchers will be much more likely to adopt it. I'm not saying that everybody then will jump to it and do it immediately, but I guess lowering the barrier for them to do it will make it much easier.
Yeah. So if I mean,
please no.
While you are moving the microphone, so can I add to this I mean, there was this notion, I think, yesterday that we should have, how was this kind of a 50,000 or 500,000 data stewards who would take care of this, stewarding the data. So if you, I mean, kind of the question, in the long run, so should this be the researchers' responsibility, or should there be people hired to do this service, provide the service to the researchers? So.
Okay, so I agree with Andy. We do need to make it easier for researchers to cite their data. We need to provide the services. But if they don't know that they actually can cite data in the first place, they're not going to think to look. So in my data centre, we had for a good 10-15 years information on our metadata catalogue web pages saying please cite this data set as, and then a citation string, and nobody ever used it because they didn't think it was possible, they didn't think it was appropriate, they just didn't do it. So yes, we need to make it easy for them to do that, and we can. The technology is there, it's not groundbreaking. We need to make it easy and usable, but we also need to tell them that it is the right thing to do. And I think that's where the real culture change is. And that's what I was thinking now, and I've missed what you said just there, I'm afraid.
Well, just yesterday there was, I think, was a little discussion about whether this kind of setting up the data properly with the kind of the metadata and whatnot. So whether this is the researcher's responsibility, or should there be services to kind of help them. So the researcher just walks to the friendly neighborhood data steward and ask them to please set up my.
I think the answer to that is yes for both of them, because the researcher is the person who knows the data set the best. They know all the details. A data steward might be able to help make suggestions for formats and put things in the right places in the metadata schema, but they won't know the intricate details of the calibration of the instrument that was used. The data steward just won't know that information. So I think it's a partnership that really has to be done.
Yeah. So in your organization, do you have this kind of a data steward arrangement?
Yes.
there are people to support.
Yeah. So in my organisation, in my group for our data centres, we have data scientists whose job is to talk to the creators of data sets and ask them for information, which they then take, the data scientists then take that information from the PIs and they put it in the right bits of the metadata catalogue to ensure that it's properly linked up, and they do checks and stuff on data formats and standardise things and generally make sure that the information that we get from the PI is as usable as it possibly can be.
Okay, there are now so many requests for... Let me go in order here. So Esa-Pekka and then Tobias.
Yes, on a general level, I, of course, wholly agree that there must be support for the researchers in achieving these things. However, it's a two-way street. I don't think it will be possible to accommodate to every odd quirk and old practice of every researcher and every small discipline. So as long as there are just there are 600 different metadata practices within biology alone, so no service scales up to that. So it must be a discussion and dialogue between what is being done in the research and how that can be supported. I think Sarah drew a parallel from a scientific publication. You know how it works. There's a title, there's an abstract, there's the author's name, here are references, and you can get a glance of it, and a librarian can work with a scientific journal very easily because they're all the same. So that's something that we should strive forward with research data too.
I wanted to iterate on a point that Andy started with about making sure that the citation that is out there is of course findable and easily accessible. And when I think about my own use cases and what we are doing, to me, it also comes down about if I provide these additional services, and that can mean some tool that I provide or a web service or something like that. It is very hard to actually understand why it is used or why it is not used unless you do some larger user study. Now, larger user study is a complicated and expensive thing, right? I can do some things on tracking user movements on a web page and so on and so on, but still I think that is also something that needs to be considered. Making exact studies of how people are using things and finding out why these services would not be used, and that can also mean perhaps there might just be easy things like the citation string on a landing page is just placed at an odd location where the researcher just doesn't look, or it's not obvious that it can be done because it's placed too far at the bottom or something like that. There can be easy things like that, and they are very easy to miss unless one goes through this additional hoop and does such a user study. So that would, from my point of view, be a good way to address these things.
My question was back to you about the data stewards. Do they assist the scientists at the mere beginning of the research project when they are supposed to describe the data management plan and maybe decide on which metadata to collect already from the beginning? This one was yours.
All right, thank you. So yes, in an ideal world, we would know what a project would be when they get awarded the grant, and that's beginning to start to happen now, and we would get in touch with the PIs at that point to help them kind of with their data management plans and identify what data they're going to be collecting, what metadata they need to collect, how they're going to store it, what they're going to do with it, when we can expect the data to actually come into our archives, that sort of thing. That is becoming more likely now as people are more used to data management planning. In the past, if there have been many a situation where we have had a project where the data has been literally dumped on us by the PI at the end of the project saying, don't ask me any questions, just take it. And in that sort of situations, we throw our hands up and go, oh, all right then, but it's not ideal. But yeah, we're in a better situation now in that we are getting in contact with the PIs, and we work with them over the course of the entire project to help them make things easier for them, because if we can make things easier for them, it makes our lives easier as well. We don't have to hassle them afterwards.
So there was a
Yeah, I wanted to say that I also agree that the data stewards are needed, but the researchers have to also better in this. But I wanted to add about the bibliographic or data citation, whatever you call it. We often say bibliographic citation to the data set. We have been providing this standard model for, well, since we started, I think. Some years ago we changed it so that it refers first to the author, so that it could be cited the same way as the publications are cited. And we actually don't know how well the researchers who are really using the data are really following our instructions. But it's actually a requirement for the reusers that they should use the citation when they are using the data in their publications.
So, can you say, so you have this Finnish social science archive. So how does this resolution, the reference resolution work in your case? I mean, there has to be, the citation has to lead to a data set.
Yes.
So how does this move? Where does this kind of this, what's the pointer from the citation to the...
I'm not sure how to...
I mean, I read a paper in social sciences, and then this reference to data set. How do I get the data set? Where do I find the data set?
From Etsin or from our data catalog.
We use URLs.
Yeah.
Okay, there's a URL kind of a pointer. Okay, thanks. Okay. I'd actually want to push on to the next topic if you... was maybe more. Oh, sorry. Yes. Sorry, I forgot about the mic. See. Yeah. So, okay, so the other kind of area of questions on my list involves infrastructure. So that's kind of this mostly to the Nordic participants. So do you feel that you have sufficient infrastructure available? So data centers, data archives for this kind of data repository use to preserve the data for secondary use, and maybe to put into the same question. So this PID. So I mean, I don't know. Maybe you are on the administrative side and say, well, everything is fine. But I mean, is there kind of the appropriate infrastructure? If not, then what would be the needs? And do you feel it's sufficiently easy to get the kind of the PIDs to the data sets? And I mean, or should there be some kind of developments? And if so, then what? I mean, is everything on the technical, the infrastructure side, is everything nice and peachy, or are there needs? And if there are needs, and actually, please identify yourself and where you are from, so that we know.
Thank you. I'm Iiris Tahvonen from Lappeenranta University of Technology, and I have only one small comment. Ella Bingham's list to CSC, that wishing list, was very good, and according to Chair's this question, I should like to add to that list the wish that the national EIDA repository could be more user-friendly to use. Mm-hmm. It is very clumsy and complicated to use, and many Finnish organizations would like to be involved to use it as national resource, but it is very hard to ordinary researchers to use.
Okay. I don't know if do we have anyone from CSC directly here now?
Well, sort of. I'm not really employed by CSC, but I work half time there, and I don't work with EIDA as such, but I know they are aware of this problem, and the drive is toward making the EIDA much more simple, much more like just another disk drive to use. So all the metadata requirements will be slacker in the future, and so on.
So can I ask, what is the relationship of this? Okay, I apologize for my naivete, but what do you feel is somehow the relationship of this national EIDA repository to, let's say, the domain-specific repositories or the university initiatives in this direction. So, I mean, should people in general be advised to use the EDA or domain-specific repositories? Or, I mean,
well, if I may continue, EDA is not a repository as such; it's a storage space. So it's for the space needs during your scientific work, and when your data set is ready, you really should be thinking about its permanent storage somewhere else. So there will be the long-term preservation and mid-term preservation services available at CSC in the near future. So that will be the thing. And there, again, there will be requirements regarding the metadata and things like that. But EDA is more for your daily work and daily processing and so on.
Yeah, actually, I wasn't somehow aware of this distinction. So
And
I'm happy
to continue to your question, so that a good repository is a good repository. So if your discipline has international systems available, so by all means use them. But of course, all disciplines don't have those. So then the national solutions are available for at least in those cases.
Yeah. So did you, Ella, want to? Can you give the mic to Ella so that I don't have to? I can keep one.
So we also recommend domain-specific repositories for the best visibility of your research in your own field. But of course, it's up to you.
Okay. So I know the participants from other countries have similar strong feelings about the kind of the national infrastructure, or so we seem to have, the Finns seem to have kind of strong views on the available service. Nobody else is kind of complaining. Or yes, there is one. So please identify yourself so we know.
Yes, my name is Vitla Childe and I'm working for SNIC, which is the Swedish National Infrastructure for Computing, and we are equivalent maybe in Sweden for the of CSC, but on much smaller scale, I would say. We are not under the same. We are a collaboration of 6 supercomputing centers. And when it comes up to the national storage infrastructure, historically in Sweden, SNIC was taking care of the HPC, mostly and mainly. The first approach of dealing with the large-scale storage infrastructure came when SNIC became a partner in the Nordic collaboration for to assist or created the Nordic Tier 1 Center for Large Hadron Collider experiment. And that time there were 3 huge research infrastructures available. I think there was a space agency, the CERN, and now we have explosion of so much more data coming from so many more research infrastructures. So we as well as CSC are providing for the active phase of the research project, the storage, which is based on IRODS and on the Dcache, to the researchers. The Swedish law states that the long-term preservation is the responsibility of the universities. So we actually encourage our researchers, once they have reached the static data sets, to take them back to their university and find archival solutions when it comes up to the long-term preservation and archiving, and adequate digital repositories when it comes up to making it available for publishing.
Okay, that's different from Finland. So many universities in Finland, Aalto included, try to stay away from this kind of this repository business.
In Sweden, the reason for that is because Swedish universities are governmental authorities, which I suppose Finnish are not anymore, just since recently. So the research data actually belongs, or it's classified as a public document. So it undergoes to the special. It requires special treatment. So that's why I'm referring to archiving as a very special thing, and then data repositories as another.
Okay,
and nobody is ready. So.
Yes.
So we will see what will happen. Nobody, it's not clear who would pay for this storage or these processes. It's not only the storage infrastructure. As somebody mentioned, there's a requirement for many different profiles that are going to assist and treat the data through the entire data lifecycle process, and PhD students are not, they haven't got any single course on data management, and it will be a core of their own work that they are going to do. So it would be good to start with the data management courses at universities, at least for the PhD students, and then from there go further.
Is there some hard deadline when everything should be ready in Sweden? So
yesterday.
When is that?
Yesterday.
Yesterday. Okay. Well,
no, I've talked to some archivists, and they've said, well, we don't have resources, we don't have know-how, we don't really know also from the legal point how to do this thing as well as the researchers, and they would just ignore the problem. So it's that simple.
Okay. Well, that's fascinating. Okay. Okay, next topic is about policies. So now I think all of our researcher communities are a little bit somehow in the early, let's say, kind of in the early stages of adoption, to put it politely. So and the universities and organizations too. So what do you think would be the most kind of the most effective ways and policy ways to encourage? I mean, let's say eventually to encourage people to go all the way to this kind of data citation becoming an everyday practice. So, I mean, I guess there are many steps on the way. So there's the kind of the data needs to be set up properly and archived and managed, and it's somewhere out there is data citation. But somehow, what are the policy issues? So are the national policies sort of right, and the kind of incentive mechanism and everything, sticks and carrots, the right balance, is everything going right in this way, this direction?
So of course, I'm not from a Nordic country, so I would be talking about the German situation. But my feeling is that there is some middleman lacking between those that produce the data and that do the scientific research, whose output is actually data, and those that have to take that up and do this management. So it's again also about the data stewardship. But coming to policy, it's a question of who is paying for that. And in Germany, it's sort of falling through the cracks because the positions that would usually do this, they were cut down. So it's all measured by research output. So I don't. If I'm a researcher, I don't get paid for making my metadata correct and providing perhaps a nice lab notebook kind of thing for tracing the provenance and so on. And I guess if we were talking about national policies, this should be addressed somehow. I don't want to say how, but there is definitely a lack in there of making this gap smaller again.
Yeah. So this is something that I heard was called an unfunded mandate somehow, that there is the requirement that you should get this thing done, but we are not going to give you any resources for this. Just please do it. So.
And those facilities, such as the one where I come from, we don't have the knowledge, the in-depth knowledge about the data and the data production process to document that. So that's we can just raise our hands and as Sarah also indicated, we just take it.
Yeah. So it's too bad that I think none of the ministry people are here anymore. Because yes, indeed. Okay, anything kind of, what is the biggest cause of pain in the Nordic countries? I mean, why? I mean, is it about the resources that you would? Let's assume that there is no more money. So, what's the? So. Well, okay. So should things, okay, I'm sort of, everything comes to the money. I was going to ask, so should this go into the university's funding model? Well, yes, it should. Should this go to the kind of the project assessment? Well, yes, it should. I'm trying to ask some kind of non-trivial question here. So it's all of sort of no-brainers.
I think something that's important, in the end it will always boil down to money, and we need more money to develop all that stuff. But I think something that we should try to avoid is developing the same stuff again and again in each institution or even in each country. So I think and I'm not deeply involved and I don't know anything of the internals, but with this vision of this European Open Science Cloud as a conceptual space, not a data cloud that's somewhere out there, but as it's set up as something where we share common services, where we share common APIs, I guess that's one of the potentially big opportunities that we have to actually get those things done, well knowing that not all of us will be getting any additional amount of money that we're going to request. So by sharing it, I guess we might actually have a chance to still do it. And when it comes to cost, we usually debate about the cost of doing it, but I think what we also should do is at the same time take a look at the cost of not doing it, both in terms of effort required to manually and in complex procedures do again and again stuff that could be automated, and the time and the kind of money that we save by investing into those procedures. So I guess both sides are important. It's an investment that will help us save money, and if we do it smartly, not individually, but across institutions and across countries, I guess we should be able to manage.
I tried to get some ideas in the morning session presentations from the ministry and academy people, so kind of what they would see as the kind of the incentive mechanism. But I think at least the ministry was somehow unwilling at this stage to commit to anything specific, but I think the agencies do have opportunities to kind of incentivize things. Do you have any great ideas of kind of where the incentives should somehow be put? I mean, how did you get your people to kind of do the right stuff?
Well, I'm not entirely sure we have them all doing the right stuff at the moment. It helps in my case in that, so the same research council that funds my group funds the data centres, NERC, Natural Environment Research Council. They also fund researchers to actually run the experiments that generate the data in the first place. And part of the requirement of the researchers getting that funding is they have to offer the resulting data sets to one of the NERC data centres. Now, this has been a standing thing where they have to offer the data produced to one of the data centres for decades, literally decades. The BADC has turned 21, anyway, is over 20 years old now. That doesn't mean that the researchers actually did what they were told. So there was the mandate from NERC saying you must deposit your data or offer your data for deposit. But there was no way that NERC had to back that threat up. So that's why we were putting so much time and effort into data citation and to wave in front of them as a carrot. Now it's looking like NERC actually have the ability to withhold the last 5% of the grant until the data centres sign off to say, yes, we have received the data, or yes, we have looked at this project and decided that actually the data is not worth keeping. So that's a situation that we're sort of in at the moment. But it took us an awful long time to get there. And even now there are some NERC-funded areas of science where they have no place to put their data. In the UK as well, the EPSRC, Engineering and Physical Sciences Research Council, did quite a nice thing for repositories in that when EPSRC released their data policy a few years ago, they put the mandate on the institution rather than the individual researcher to make sure that the data was archived and managed properly. And this was a good thing because lots of institutions started going, oh, okay, we better do something about this. And then they started building their own institutional repositories, which, again, reinventing the wheel when they possibly didn't need to. But an awful lot of institutions now, data has become more important for them. They're looking into it. They're collaborating with each other to build repositories that will work for their researchers. Because I think a lot of the universities now have realised how valuable data can actually be for them. It's a major asset to the university, just like software and other intellectual property.
Tobias, please. Yes.
So think about sticks and carrots here. Isn't the one stick that the funding agencies have? Isn't that the data management plan?
Yes.
So that's something where you could say have to make an agreement, have to make something upfront before starting that takes over when you're gone, basically.
I was somehow coming to this same thing myself, and it's too bad that the academy person had to run to prepare this year's state of science in Finland report. But so now, okay, to take a concrete example, so now Academy of Finland, which is our major research funding agency, for the first time required these systematic data management plans in this autumn's call. And this created kind of panic among most of the researchers. I mean, lots of people came to me asking, okay, so what is this thing? And I mean, where can I get a template that I can copy to my proposal? And I would have liked to ask her, okay, so how do you think exercise succeeded? But you are right that now if this is kind of a part of this proposal evaluation, so there's a component where you get feedback, well, otherwise a nice proposal, but the data management plan was so and so, so this teaches the researchers quite quickly to do things properly. On the other hand, it would be nice to have some kind of a models, so now people were sort of left kind of a okay.
Thank you. Yes, I don't want to be the pessimist here, but I think plan is not the solution for this, because actually the academy has demanded a kind of a research management plan since 2008, and since then some of the research projects have in their research plan that they will archive their data to FSD. And as we don't know we don't have the information which ones have, we just know that many of them have, and we still are not getting the data. Some of it, but not all of it. That's for sure. So somebody should do the policing.
Okay, so there should be some assessment also that things have been done as promised. Yes, okay.
But again, with data management plans, since you quoted them as an example now for policies, is when they were introduced and the way they were introduced, they were very successful in raising awareness for the issues to be discussed and considered by the researchers. They are relatively useless for really doing data management. I mean, they are free-form text documents and usually written at a very early stage. They are not being kept and maintained in most cases as a living document as they should be. You need to fill them manually, and you can't monitor them, you can't act on them. So what we are currently working on heavily is, again, integrating them within a research infrastructure where a lot of the stuff is pre-filled, where there are triggers that require you to switch from free-form text document initially, where you at the start of an outline of a project start writing what you plan to do, that at a certain stage you actually need to link it to a persistent identifier pointing to the data. where we automate processes such as why do I need to fill out the metadata description of the file formats, for example, when there are services that can compute that and provide it for me. So again, with data management plans, if we want them to be successful, we need to put the infrastructure in place that takes the burden away from the researcher on providing a lot of technical, administrative, and so on metadata that should come from elsewhere, and in some cases can be harvested automatically in professional research infrastructures. So this is a vision. It's not in place anywhere, but once we are talking about establishing research infrastructures, we should think the big picture and think the entire research process, where we can actually automate things to make it happen. And only then can we have a reasonable policy that is also accepted by the researchers, seeing that it doesn't put too much additional burden onto them. Beyond that, people will always try to avoid additional effort if they don't see the trade-off between work and benefit.
And maybe there should be some co-data working group on researcher initiatives. So how do you get the researchers to comply?
Well, we were also talking about the open. I think you were raising that, right? The European Open Science Cloud. I mean, you just mentioned, this is a vision and not in place. But couldn't the European Open Science Cloud provide such a service that exactly does that? Because this is happening right now, right? It is something where you can start with.
It is starting right now. Yeah.
Okay, so I have one more topic. I have one more question. So the topic is about the issues discussed here. So the presentations and kind of ideas where things might be going and how we should proceed. So are there some kind of a issue, kind of concern, kind of, I don't know, the proposed standards or policies or frameworks, or somehow that you feel that things don't look right? I mean there are problems. I mean getting the infrastructure there and getting the researchers to comply and getting the steward support and the funding and so. But do you feel that there is something in this whole enterprise that is somehow going in the wrong direction? Okay, so yeah, okay. I guess we wouldn't be here if we were kind of luddites on this. Okay, so now.
Well, just
okay, so
just one devil's advocate comment. Well, I mean, is it really worth all the trouble talking about data citation? Is it really doing what we hope and assume it is doing? That would be sort of the antithesis to what you just indicated, right? So is it just, are we just making a big fuss and nothing is happening?
Yeah. Okay. Good.
But that's, I don't answer that.
Yeah. I guess there are many steps along the way before we are even at this data citation stage, except for kind of local settings. But you think that the data citations kind of might not be a worthwhile goal, I mean, for all this effort. So
maybe it's what do you call it, an illusion of perception, something like that. Maybe we are missing some big elephant. But I just asked the question. I don't know what it actually would be. So I don't.
But it's
something better.
Yeah. But because it's a lot of work and a lot of effort. So somehow it's good to ask if we are kind of doing the right thing. Okay, so then the final question, which I would like maybe to first focus on the kind of the speakers, and because I want you to answer, and some of you have had the opportunity to think about this ahead of time. So let's assume that we take the data citation as a target. I mean, despite the kind of the parenthesized doubts here, or devil thinking. So what is the kind of the biggest challenge on this road? What is the biggest roadblock? and what is the most important action to take to move in that direction. So what's the biggest challenge and what's the most important action? And let's go in the order of the presentation. So, Sarah. Yes.
That's the problem with being first.
And what's the thing on which we should focus our main efforts? What's missing from?
Well, I think for the Nordic countries, if I'm going to talk to you directly, it's don't try and reinvent the wheel if the wheel already exists and you can kind of nick the same design from something else. I mean, in the UK, we've done quite a lot in terms of data citation, and other countries around in Europe and the States, we've done a lot. So we're always more than willing to share our experiences and what we've learned and the difficult things like, oh, we really wish we'd done this in this way rather than the way we actually did it, which actually turned out to be more complicated than it was worth, sort of thing. So yeah, learn from what's already out there if you can, but then also I think be aware of the fact that there's not going to be a one-size-fits-all solution. And we can't ever have one perfect standard to rule everything, because science is too big and too diverse. And that's just science. We're not talking about all the other data that gets collected and dealt with. So yeah, I think that'd be learn from others' experiences, but be aware that they won't necessarily have the ones that will suit you. So pick and choose, I think.
So what's the most important action?
Most important action? Go and talk to people about it. Raise awareness. If you, I'm constantly surprised. I still keep going to scientific meetings and I talk about data citation like everybody knows what it is, and then I have researchers going, "What do you mean? I don't understand. Explain this to me." So, go out and be an advocate for data citation and publication. Talk to people about it in the corridor, in the coffee lounge, over lunch. And yeah, just spread the word basically, because there's an awful lot of people out there who still don't.
Okay, thanks. Next in speaker order is, I think, you.
I guess biggest challenge and action are tightly coupled. In my perspective, I think the biggest challenge is to enable research to actually do it and enable data centers to do it, and for that we need the services. And that's for me the clear action is, I'm not saying now stop talking, start doing, but so I'm not contradicting you, Sarah, but I think we should start doing and developing those services and making them available. And if it turns out not to be the perfect service, let's improve the service, but we should start building on top of existing best practice that is out there, or good practice, if we can't call it best practice yet. But yeah, evolve the service framework around it, and then researchers and users and data centers will come following.
Cool, thanks. Tobias, I didn't give you these questions ahead of time, but maybe you can contribute.
I can.
What I personally perceive as the biggest challenge is the thing about service evaluation. So actually getting feedback on what services are good, how they could be improved from the actual users, because the actual users are really hard to get. So that what I see as the biggest challenge. And of course the action would then be to do evaluation, and preferably also across communities, institutions.
Okay, thanks. And Esabek, I think you were next.
Yeah, well, something similar to that, building a national services as I am doing. The real challenge for me is to get a dialogue going on with real researchers. So there's a gap, and it's not my fault entirely. So researchers have other priorities on the short scale. They do research and they apply for grants, and this is their daily breadwinner, and my interests are different. But if you can find suspectable researchers who would be interested in putting some time and effort to these things, please tell me about it.
Okay. Ella.
Well, can you repeat the question, please? Sorry. So much has been said already.
In order to kind of solve all the problems that we are facing in kind of getting data management in the repositories and this is everything right, and so that eventually we can have data citations. So what is the biggest roadblock? What's the biggest challenge along the way?
I think it's the mindsets of the researchers, because this is extra work. Of course, we are building services to help them in every possible way, but in the end, we cannot really do it. Even if we cannot do it if the researcher is not there next to us, giving advice on how could we best help him or her.
Okay. And what's the most important action to somehow?
I believe in this science community in solving this problem, so that this comes standard practice, as has happened with journal article citations. So people will see the need for themselves and act accordingly, and this will of course take time.
But what's the action? So now you are kind of wishing that expecting the community will discover the benefits on their own. Is there something that
the action is to provide help and support and encouragement and the teaching materials. And maybe have some prominent figures, like showing the way, showing good example. Like yesterday, the people who were given these prizes.
Okay, we'll make note of this. Okay, so then the floor is open for further comments on this, and you please identify yourself and where you come from.
Tuomas Aaltonen, Finnish Social Science Data Archive. This is not, probably not a big challenge or something, but many times when you listen to a presentation like this or presentations like yesterday, we say this requires cultural change, and then usually after that you say, well, change is happening, but it's not quite here yet, and it's been going on for quite a while. And I kind of think this sort of relates to what Ella said about do we do enough? Are we able to do enough to actually make the change happen? Because it might be our illusion that there is a change happening. If it's not, then we probably should think out of the box and figure out if the services we provide, if the sort of the ideal, if the incentives, if they are the correct ones, or if we actually think with a carrot instead of feeding it. So this is something I guess sort of not looking to researchers, but looking inside, thinking about research services and people who work in this on this field.
Yeah. I do know from my local community that researchers are not terribly well aware of all these wonderful developments in open data and open science yet. So Ella and Ivy have lots of work ahead of us in this. So, okay. So, other views. So, the cultural change needs to happen, and we need to figure out how to make this come about. And sort of seriously. So it's I sort of agree that. I mean, this cultural change doesn't happen completely on its own, so there needs to be some activity and driving and kind of wisdom in kind of moving the community in the right direction.
I think it was you who indicated this about the management courses for the actual PhD students, and I mean that is one good way to change the culture, because those are the people coming from the bottom again.
Yes, so Actually, Petri, there is among his other duties, he is the head of our Helsinki area ICT doctoral education network. So we'll make this an item our doctoral education for the ICT students. Or at least talk about this. Okay, more comments. Okay, so it's 5 minutes past 4, so I guess it's time to end the day, and let me thank you all again for a kind of a most inspiring meeting and a kind of an excellent discussion. I'm really happy that we somehow we moved away from the panel to kind of more open discussion. This was, I think, was a kind of very informative and good discussion. And particularly want to thank our speakers for taking the time to prepare their presentations and come here and join us in this event. And I hope you have a good trip back home and kind of keep up the good work. How was this? You had this nice kind of postcard, which was kind of a...
keep calm and cite data.
Yeah, keep calm and cite data, so, okay.
I suggest we give a round of applause to Becca, who has done an immense
job.